are losing track of what we really want. What we really want isn't the big ending we're striving for. It's not marriage or a new house or a big fancy award. What we want is disguised by the shiny elusiveness of what we think we want. 2 years ago, I left my corporate job and set out on a solo trip around the world. I wanted to experience the people, the cultures, and the adventures. I wanted to grow as a person, and I promised myself I was going to take in every moment of my year around the world. I didn't know what I was going to do when I was done traveling, but I didn't care. I wanted to be in the moment. I had spent my entire life saving for this trip, putting every extra penny I had into a savings account so I could travel someday. I took extreme measures to cut my spending and rarely bought new clothes. I slept on a mattress from a dumpster for many years, and I once used a bike tire repair kit to patch my shoe, knowing it would be less expensive than a new pair. The comb I carry with me is the same comb, the only comb I've had for over 20 years. I learned during my first week of traveling how differently people view happiness, and that sometimes happiness comes in the form of a smile and not just the balance of a bank account. I met a man in Bali who taught me that having money doesn't always make us happy. He told me, "Renee, I have been bankrupt 3 times. The smile on someone's face when I bring them a coffee or buy them lunch is what makes me happy." I met a woman who worked at my hotel in Uzbekistan, who cared for me like her own daughter. Every night, she would make sure I made it to my room safely and that I locked the door. And when the blinds in my room wouldn't close, she found a bedsheet to hang over the window for me. Each morning before I left for the day, she would make sure my water bottle was filled and that I looked absolutely beautiful, pulling long blonde hairs off of my black t-shirt. We didn't speak a single word of the same language, and yet I experienced a deep, caring love from Irina. I was learning that people all over the world could care for me, and sometimes, because I had no other choice, I had to let them. The countless number of times that someone offered to help me up a curb, or push me up a steep ramp, or even offered to piggyback me when there wasn't a concrete path, became a part of my everyday in other parts of the world. 4 months after I embarked on my big trip, I received confirmation from Guinness World Records that they were opening a new record for me. I sat in Barbados next to the crystal clear water and listened to the soothing sounds of the waves as they crashed against the shore while I read through the requirements to get the record for most countries visited in 1 year using a wheelchair. I knew I could do it. And suddenly, I knew what I was going to do after I was done traveling. It was a moment of clarity that we so rarely experience, a sign from a higher power, if you will, that this is exactly what I needed to be doing. Can you remember a time in your life when everything was so confusing and suddenly it became clear, as though everything you were doing was for a good reason? It was so obvious. I was going to visit as many places as I could, and then I was going to show the world that people with disabilities can do amazing things. I was going to empower other people to live their lives the way they wanted to, with or without a wheelchair. This award is everything I needed and everything I wanted. I continued traveling the world, although I was chasing after something different now. I still saw the beauty in humankind. Esther in Micronesia, who let me cry on her shoulder when my wheelchair was sent to a different country, and Mirtha Hood, who pushed me up big hills in Indonesia and sang love songs to me in the car, and Nessie in Tonga, who carried my wheelchair up a flight of stairs several times a day while I scooted up on my butt. There wasn't an elevator at her hotel, but together we made it work. Her phone calls every morning and night were the beginning of a long, beautiful friendship. But I also saw a big, shiny, silver picture frame hanging on my wall, and I wanted that Guinness World Record. On the day I received my record, I was elated. I had traveled to 66 countries in 1 year using my wheelchair. I was the only wheelchair traveler in the world who, to my knowledge, had done something like this. I spent hours creating a video message to send to people around the world, thanking them for teaching me about kindness and who I am as a person. I couldn't wait to do something positive with my award. So when a national news source picked up my story, I just knew I would have the chance to change someone else's life. Maybe, just maybe, the right person read my story, they too would be empowered to live big. I know now why we should never read the comments on social media, but on that day, I did. I was devastated, mortified, humiliated. I didn't understand how complete strangers who knew so little about my trip or about me could hate me so much. I wanted to take back everything I had done. I wanted to give back my award. What do we do when we finally get everything we want, only to feel extreme regret and disappointment? Well, I think we all handle it differently, but I fell into a deep depression and hid away from the rest of the world for several weeks, unable to comment any further on my award. Quietly and alone, I would sift through photos of my trip and smile when I remembered Chip, who showed me the mountains in Kyrgyzstan, and Misa, who made sure I saw the dolphins in the Maldives. And my heart would ache when I remembered stories of people around the world so much less fortunate than me. Kong survived the killing fields in Cambodia. My masseuse in Thailand had been imprisoned because she stole food to feed her daughter. Dozens of people using wheelchairs around the world flashed through my mind. None of them had a wheelchair as nice as mine. And it was unlikely they would ever have the same opportunities that I did. While I wanted to experience the people and the cultures around the world, what I really wanted was to grow. I wanted to take in every moment of my life that led me to my Guinness World Record. When I was 5 years old, my mom and I traveled to New York City to see a specialist for my disability. It was my very first memory of being on an airplane. I spent much of my childhood traveling around the country in search of treatments, and along the way, I found a love of travel. 10 years ago, I experienced a defining moment as I sat in a doctor's office and listened as I was told the only way I would ever walk is if they were to amputate my legs and replace them with prosthetics. I had to decide if I was willing to give up my legs, which were, for all intents and purposes, quite useless, or keep them and begin to fall in love with them. I decided to keep my legs, and I love them now. And then I made the big decision to leave my career, something I had worked for over 20 years to build, and against almost everyone else's advice, to go do something so bold and extreme to prove to the world what someone using a wheelchair is capable of. It would be impossible for anyone who saw me holding that big picture frame to know that behind that award was a transformative, once-in-a-lifetime journey going back farther and deeper than just a few plane rides and border crossings. But that journey is something I would never give back. I had spent years saving, planning, and traveling to get to where I was. And in a matter of minutes, I allowed the joy to be taken from me by the comments of complete strangers. It took me a long time to come back stronger, ready to talk about my story. But I did. Now, I'm not giving away my joy or accomplishments anymore. I'm learning to enjoy the journey and the award, regardless of what other people think. The challenge we have is that the big shiny ending, the promotion, the new car, the big fancy award, often consumes us and takes everything we ever wanted out of our journey. The ending isn't always so glamorous, and it's easy to forget why we wanted what we did. But if we can remember all of the steps leading up to the ending, we will learn that it was rarely ever about just the ending. It was about the journey too, because in that journey is where we grow. It's where we learn. It's where the real reward is. And that is the most important part. Thank you.